2 generations ago, a self-sufficient household was the standard. People caught their own food, collected their own water, preserved their own medicine, fixed their own structures, and handled their own animals without asking anyone's permission. Then came the regulations, some legitimate, some genuinely excessive, that slowly restricted or outright banned practices that had sustained families for centuries. Here are the 15 illegal survival tricks our grandparents used that still work today. Number 15. Collecting rainwater, banned in some states until recently. Collecting rainwater from your own roof is one of the most ancient and practical water management practices in human history, and was, until recently, technically illegal in several U.S. states, including Colorado, Utah, and Washington. Colorado specifically prohibited rainwater collection for decades on the legal theory that precipitation belonged to downstream water rights holders, a doctrine that applied to a modern suburban homeowner collecting water in a barrel, the same legal framework as a major irrigation diversion. Colorado partially reversed this in 2016, allowing single-family homes to collect up to 110 gallons from the roof. Utah allows up to 2 100-gallon containers totaling 200 gallons. Washington State, which had prohibited collection without a water right, passed legislation in 2009 allowing residential collection. Most states now permit residential rainwater collection with varying limits. The practice itself is straightforward and remains one of the most practical water supplementation methods available. A 1,000 square foot roof receiving 1 inch of rain produces approximately 600 gallons of water. A standard 55-gallon rain barrel connected to a downspout captures a meaningful portion of this, fills in a single moderate rainfall event, and provides water for garden irrigation, livestock, and, with appropriate filtration and treatment, drinking water. The specific water quality caveat: roof runoff contains particulates, bird waste, and whatever is on the roof surface. First flush diverters, inexpensive devices that divert the initial runoff, the dirtiest, away from the collection container before the cleaner subsequent water enters the barrel, significantly improve quality. Any collected rainwater intended for drinking should be filtered and treated with bleach or boiled. Before we continue, I prepared a step-by-step ebook that's currently on sale, packed with practical survival systems and simple life hacks. It's designed to help you save money, stay prepared, and improve everyday safety in a simple, realistic way. You can access it instantly while the discounted price is still available. You can find the link in the description. Now let's get back to the video. Number 14. Foraging on public land without a permit. Foraging, collecting wild plants, mushrooms, berries, and nuts on public land ranges from freely permitted to regulated to prohibited depending on the specific land management agency, the specific plant or mushroom, and the specific location. National Park Service land prohibits the commercial collection of plants and mushrooms and limits personal collection to what can be consumed on site. Many national forest lands allow personal use collection with limits, typically around 2 pounds per day for mushrooms. Some state parks prohibit collection entirely. The fundamental practice, knowing which wild plants are edible, where to find them, and how to harvest them without damaging the population, is one of the oldest and most practical survival skills that exists and was practiced by every previous generation without permit or restriction. The regulatory framework around it is recent and in many cases specifically targeted at commercial harvesting operations rather than personal foragers. The specific knowledge base for practical foraging is well documented and genuinely valuable. Watercress, Nasturtium officinale, grows in clean cold streams and is edible. Dandelion, Taraxacum officinale, grows in every lawn and is entirely edible. Leaves, flowers, and roots. Wild garlic, Allium ursinum, and ramps, Allium tricoccum, are in the Allium family and aromatic. Elderberries, Sambucus nigra, produce fruit that is safe cooked but mildly toxic raw. Cattails, Typha species, produce edible shoots, pollen, and starchy roots. The critical skill is the specific and confident identification of edible species before consumption, because several common toxic plants resemble edible ones closely enough to be dangerous. Number 13. Fishing without a license in emergency conditions. Every U.S. state requires a fishing license for recreational fishing, And the licensing system funds conservation programs that have measurably improved fish populations since the mid-20th century. The licenses are generally inexpensive. Most states charge $20 to $40 for an annual license, and the legal framework around fishing regulations is one of the more clearly justified regulatory structures in natural resource management. The historical context: fishing without license or limit was the standard for most of American history. The depletion of fish populations in the 19th and early 20th centuries, the documented collapse of Atlantic salmon populations, the near extinction of striped bass in certain river systems, the overharvest of Great Lakes fish stocks, was the specific documented harm that the licensing and regulation system was designed to address. The regulations work. Fish populations in regulated systems are documented as significantly healthier than they were before regulation. However, the knowledge of how to catch fish, set lines, trot lines, primitive traps, hand fishing, noodling, and the specific reading of water to locate fish is exactly the kind of practical knowledge that grandparents passed down and that has largely disappeared from the general population. Trot lines, which are horizontal lines with multiple baited hooks suspended between two anchor points, were a standard method for continuous passive harvest in rivers and lakes for centuries. They are now regulated, requiring specific permits in many states and prohibited in some, but remain one of the most effective passive fishing methods that exists. The survival applicable knowledge here is the technique, understanding how to rig a trot line, where to place it, what bait to use, and how to tend it, regardless of the current regulatory context for daily practice. Number 12. Keeping a productive backyard flock without permits. Backyard chickens, specifically the keeping of a small laying flock in a residential area, has gone through a documented cycle from universal practice to urban prohibition to partial reinstatement in many U.S. cities. In 1950, keeping chickens in an American city or town was completely normal. By 1980, most municipalities had prohibited it in residential zones as part of the broad prohibition of farm animals in urban areas. Since approximately 2005, urban chicken keeping has been progressively reinstated in hundreds of American cities following sustained advocacy from urban agriculture proponents. The practice remains restricted or prohibited in many municipalities. Roosters are almost universally prohibited in urban residential areas due to noise. The number of hens permitted varies from 2 to 6 in most jurisdictions that allow it, with requirements for co-op setback distances from property lines and neighbors' homes. The specific survival value of a small laying flock is documented and practical. 6 hens produce approximately 4 to 5 eggs per day during peak laying season, approximately 25 to 30 eggs per week, which represents a significant and self-renewing protein source. Hens eat kitchen scraps, insects, and commercial feed, converting a family's food waste into protein. A standard laying hen costs approximately $5 to $25 depending on breed and source, produces eggs for approximately 3 to 5 years, and is itself edible after its laying productivity declines. Number 11. Making and selling food from home without a commercial kitchen license. Home food production, baking bread, preserving jam, making pickles, pressing cider, for sale without a commercial kitchen license was the economic norm in America for most of its history. The regulation requiring commercial kitchen certification for any food sold commercially began in the early 20th century and was motivated by legitimate public health concerns about foodborne illness in commercial food production. The cottage food exemption, which allows the sale of specific low-risk foods produced in a home kitchen without commercial license, has been adopted in all 50 U.S. states as of 2024, but with significant variation in what is permitted. Most states allow the sale of baked goods, jams, jellies, and other non-potentially hazardous foods under cottage food laws, with annual revenue limits ranging from $5,000, restrictive states, to $75,000. California's current limit after 2022 legislation. The most restrictive states limit cottage food sales to farmers markets and direct-to-consumer transactions. The most permissive states, like Wyoming and Montana, allow essentially unrestricted home food business operation. The specific practical survival knowledge here is home food preservation, canning, fermenting, pickling, dehydrating, which functions whether or not the product is sold. Home canning using USDA-tested recipes is safe and legal for personal use in every state. The specific skills: proper water bath canning for high-acid foods, jams, pickles, tomatoes, pressure canning for low-acid foods, vegetables, meats, lactofermentation for sauerkraut, kimchi, and pickles, and salt curing and smoking for meat preservation. Number 10. Distilling water using homemade equipment. Distilling water, the process of heating water to steam, condensing the steam back to liquid, and collecting the purified condensate, is one of the oldest and most reliable water purification methods and requires no commercial equipment, no chemicals, and no power beyond a heat source. A basic solar still, which can be constructed from a piece of clear plastic sheeting, a container, and a collection vessel, was documented as an effective emergency water collection method in U.S. Army survival manuals. The legal complexity around distillation in the United States is primarily about alcohol distillation, rather than water distillation. Home distillation of alcohol is federally prohibited without a distilled spirits plant permit from the Alcohol and Tobacco Tax and Trade Bureau, TTB. This prohibition extends even to distillation of beer or wine that was itself legally produced at home. The prohibition does not apply to distillation of water, which has no legal restriction in any U.S. jurisdiction. The confusion between alcohol distillation and water distillation has led to widespread incorrect belief that distillation equipment itself is illegal to own. In reality, owning a still is legal in the United States. Operating it to produce distilled spirits without a TTB permit is the violation. Building or owning equipment capable of distilling water, solar stills, or steam distillation apparatus for water purification has no legal restriction. The practical solar still produces limited but genuine water from soil moisture, plant material, and contaminated water in emergency conditions. A standard ground solar still, a pit covered with clear plastic with a collection container at the bottom, produces approximately 1 to 2 cups of water per day in moderate conditions, which is insufficient for full hydration, but meaningful as a supplement. Number 9. Hunting out of season for survival. Game hunting seasons, the specific calendar windows during which different animals may be legally taken, are a conservation measure with documented effectiveness. Before regulated hunting seasons were established in the late 19th and early 20th centuries, commercial hunting and unregulated year-round harvest drove passenger pigeons to extinction by 1914, reduced bison from an estimated 30 to 60 million animals to approximately 300 by 1900, and collapsed white-tailed deer populations across much of the eastern United States. The grandparent-era practice of year-round, unregulated subsistence hunting, taking deer, turkey, small game, and waterfowl as needed throughout the year, was genuinely sustainable at the population densities of the 18th and 19th centuries, and genuinely destructive when continued at 20th century human population densities. The regulations are justified. The knowledge of how to hunt, track, field dress, and preserve wild game is completely separate from the regulatory question. The survival applicable knowledge, reading animal sign, tracks, scat, feeding areas, bedding sites, understanding seasonal patterns of movement and concentration, setting snares for small game, field dressing and cooling harvested meat to prevent spoilage, and smoking or salt curing meat for preservation. These skills were passed from generation to generation for most of human history and are now documented primarily in hunting education materials, wilderness survival manuals, and the oral knowledge of experienced hunters. Number 8. Seed saving and replanting non-certified varieties. Seed saving, selecting the best specimens of a year's garden production, allowing them to mature fully, harvesting the seed, drying it, and storing it for the following season, was the universal agricultural practice for all of human history until the 20th century. The development of hybrid seed varieties in the 1920s and 1930s, which produce vigorous first-generation plants but do not breed true from saved seed, changed the economics of seed saving for commercial farmers. The subsequent development of plant variety protection law and patent protection for seed traits changed the legal landscape. The Plant Variety Protection Act of 1970 extended intellectual property protections to seed varieties, and the subsequent use of utility patents to protect specific genetic traits in crop plants has produced a documented legal framework in which saving and replanting patented seed varieties is a violation of federal patent law. Monsanto, now Bayer, and other seed companies have brought documented legal actions against farmers for saving and replanting patented seed varieties, winning judgments in U.S. federal courts. The practical implication for garden-scale seed saving, open-pollinated and heirloom varieties, which are not patented and which breed true from saved seed, can be saved, replanted, and traded freely. The specific varieties that cannot be legally saved are patented varieties, which are typically commercial hybrids sold under brand names. For a personal garden using open-pollinated heirloom varieties, seed saving is entirely legal, entirely practical, and produces an annually improving seed stock adapted to the specific conditions of your garden. The specific seed-saving process varies by plant. Tomatoes require fermentation. The seeds are fermented in water for 2 to 3 days to remove the gel coating that inhibits germination, then rinsed and dried. Beans and peas are the simplest. Allow the pods to dry on the plant, harvest, shell, and dry at room temperature for 2 to 4 weeks before storing in paper envelopes. Squash and cucumbers require cross-pollination awareness. If you are growing multiple varieties of the same species within insect range, approximately 500 feet for cucumbers, a quarter mile for squash, the varieties will cross and the saved seed will produce hybrids in subsequent generations. The solution is to grow only one variety of each species, or to hand-pollinate and bag specific flowers before they open to prevent cross-pollination. Storage conditions for saved seed dramatically affect viability. The rule of thumb in seed saving is that the sum of the storage temperature in Fahrenheit and the relative humidity as a percentage should be below 100. A cool, dry pantry at 60 degrees Fahrenheit and 30% humidity, some 90, will preserve most vegetable seed viability for 3 to 5 years. Refrigerator storage at 40 degrees Fahrenheit and 30% humidity, some 70, can preserve viability for a decade or more. Silica gel desiccant packets in sealed containers remove moisture and are the standard tool in serious seed-saving operations. The nonprofit seed-saving organizations, Seed Savers Exchange, founded in 1975 in Decorah, Iowa by Diane Ott Wheely, have documented and preserved thousands of heirloom varieties that would otherwise have been lost as commercial agriculture shifted to hybrid and patented varieties. The Seed Savers Exchange Seed Bank holds over 20,000 documented heirloom varieties. Number 7. Building outbuildings and structures without permits. Building permits, required by most U.S. municipalities and counties for the construction of structures above certain sizes, exist to ensure that construction meets safety codes, that structures are properly sited relative to property lines and easements, and that electrical, plumbing, and structural work meets minimum standards. The permit system is a legitimate public safety mechanism. Before building codes and permit requirements, Americans built their own barns, chicken coops, root cellars, smokehouses, outhouses, and additional structures without filing any paperwork. The specific structures most relevant to food storage and self-sufficiency, root cellars, smokehouses, and small outbuildings for animal keeping, were universal features of working homesteads. The current regulatory landscape varies enormously by jurisdiction. Rural counties and unincorporated areas often have minimal permit requirements or specific exemptions for agricultural structures. Many states exempt structures below a certain square footage, typically 100 to 200 square feet, from permit requirements. The specific rules governing your property are local, county, or municipal codes, and vary so significantly that general statements about legality are not reliable. The practical skills: a root cellar built into a hillside with proper drainage maintains a temperature of approximately 32 to 40 degrees Fahrenheit year-round through passive earth insulation, providing natural refrigeration for vegetables, fruit, canned goods, and dairy. Root cellars were standard features of every farmstead until mechanical refrigeration became widespread in the mid-20th century and remain one of the most effective off-grid food preservation methods available. Number 6. Using wood ash for soil amendment, soap, and preservation. Wood ash, the residue from burning hardwood, was one of the most versatile materials in the pre-industrial household and is now largely discarded. The specific uses that grandparents knew and that remain practical today. Wood ash is an effective soil amendment for acidic soils, providing calcium carbonate, lime, potassium, and trace minerals. The application rate is approximately 10 to 15 pounds per 100 square feet for pH adjustment, comparable to agricultural lime. It should not be applied to acid-loving plants, blueberries, azaleas, or mixed with fresh manure, which releases nitrogen as ammonia. Wood ash leached with water produces lye water, potassium hydroxide solution, which combined with animal fat produces potassium-based soft soap, the same soap that was made in every rural American household until commercial soap became widely available in the early 20th century. The basic process involves collecting ash in a wooden barrel, slowly dripping water through it, collecting the lye solution that drips out, testing the concentration with an egg. A fresh egg should float slightly in sufficiently concentrated lye, and boiling it with rendered animal fat until the soap forms. Wood ash can also be used as a topical antiseptic. The alkalinity kills many bacteria, and as a natural pesticide against soft-bodied insects. The ash absorbs and desiccates insects, and its alkalinity is toxic to many pest species. Number 5. Herbal medicine and home remedies. What actually works? The use of medicinal plants was the primary medical system for all of human history before the mid-20th century and remains the primary medical system for approximately 80% of the world's population, according to the World Health Organization. The regulation of medicinal herb claims in the United States, specifically the FDA's requirement that health claims for supplements be substantiated and that no supplement be marketed for the treatment of disease without drug approval, means that most traditional herbal remedies cannot be legally described in their historical terms by the companies that sell them. The herbs with the most robust documented evidence base for their traditional uses, Echinacea purpurea, has documented immune-modulating effects and has been shown in multiple randomized controlled trials to modestly reduce the duration of upper respiratory tract infections. Valerian root, Valeriana officinalis, has documented mild sedative effects and has been studied for insomnia, with results suggesting modest improvement in sleep quality. Elderberry, Sambucus nigra, syrup has documented antiviral properties with several studies showing reduction in influenza duration. Ginger, Zingiber officinale, for nausea, has strong evidence from multiple trials, including for morning sickness and chemotherapy-induced nausea. Plantain, Plantago major, the common lawnweed, not the banana, has documented anti-inflammatory and wound-healing properties when applied topically. A poultice of fresh crushed plantain leaves applied to insect stings, minor wounds, and rashes is documented in ethnobotanical literature as effective and has some evidence base in clinical research. This specific plant grows in essentially every lawn in North America, is completely safe for topical use, and is one of the most practical first aid plants available. Number 4. Slaughtering and processing your own livestock. Home slaughter and processing of livestock, killing, bleeding, skinning, eviscerating, and butchering animals raised on your own property is legal in the United States for personal consumption on your own property. The legal restriction that applies is commercial sale. Meat sold commercially must be processed in a USDA-inspected facility. Meat from your own animals processed on your own property for your own household consumption is not regulated by the USDA. The specific practical knowledge involved in home slaughter, which most Americans under 60 do not have, and which was universal knowledge in previous generations, includes humane killing methods, captive bolt, rifle shot to the brain, or throat cut after stun, immediate bleeding, cooling the carcass quickly to prevent bacterial growth, skinning without contaminating the meat with hide bacteria, evisceration without puncturing the digestive tract, and fabricating the carcass into recognizable cuts. The timeline between slaughter and eating is more compressed than commercial processing. A home-processed pig or steer should ideally be cooled below 40 degrees Fahrenheit within a few hours, and the meat processed within a day or two unless hung in cold conditions. The cold temperatures that prevail in October, November, and early December in most of the continental United States made fall the traditional slaughter season. The specific hog-killing time of rural American tradition was time to take advantage of natural cold for meat preservation. Number 3. Making vinegar from scratch. Vinegar, specifically apple cider vinegar, wine vinegar, and grain vinegar, is one of the most practical preservation agents, cleaning solutions, and medicinal substances in the traditional household, and can be made at home from any fermentable substrate. The commercial vinegar industry is regulated for acidity standards. Commercial vinegar must be at minimum 4% acetic acid for labeling purposes. But home production of vinegar for personal use has no legal restriction in the United States. The process begins with an alcoholic liquid, apple cider, wine, beer, or sugar water, which is inoculated with a mother of vinegar, a cellulose acetobacter colony, or simply left open to the air in a warm location. Acetobacter bacteria convert the alcohol, ethanol, to acetic acid, a wide-mouth container with a cloth cover, to allow air exchange while keeping debris out. At room temperature in a warm location produces vinegar in approximately 2 to 4 weeks from a wine or cider base. The specific uses of homemade vinegar that grandparents relied on: food preservation. Pickling with 5% or higher acidity vinegar is effective and documented safe by the USDA when following tested recipes. Household cleaning, acetic acid is an effective disinfectant and dissolves mineral deposits. Wound cleaning, dilute acetic acid has documented antibacterial properties. And weed control, full-strength vinegar at 20 to 30% acidity, available commercially, kills surface vegetation on contact. Number 2. Trapping for food and pest control. Trapping, the use of mechanical devices to capture or kill animals, is regulated in every U.S. state, with specific licensing requirements, season restrictions, legal trap types, and check interval requirements varying by state and by target species. The specific concern that produced this regulatory framework was the commercial fur trade's documented depletion of beaver, otter, mink, and other fur-bearing species by the late 19th century, combined with the specific animal welfare concerns around traps that could injure non-target animals and hold target animals for extended periods. The grandparent-era practice of setting simple snares and box traps for rabbits, squirrels, raccoons, and other small game was universal in rural America, and is now regulated. The knowledge itself, how to construct a basic figure-4 deadfall trap from sticks, how to set a wire snare along a rabbit run, where to place a box trap for maximum effectiveness, is documented in wilderness survival manuals and hunting education materials, and remains practical knowledge regardless of the legal context for regular use. The specific survival-relevant knowledge. Rabbits and squirrels are the most abundant, most catchable small game animals in North America and remain populous in both rural and suburban environments. A snare set on a well-used rabbit run, identifiable by the flattened grass trail and small droppings, has a documented catch rate that makes passive trapping significantly more calorie efficient than active hunting for small game. Number 1. Hand-pumping groundwater without a water rights permit. In the western United States, groundwater rights are governed by the prior appropriation doctrine, first in time, first in right, which means that groundwater belongs to whoever has the legal right to use it, not necessarily to the landowner above it. Several western states regulate the drilling of new wells and, in some cases, the pumping of existing wells, with permit requirements that can be onerous for new users. The eastern United States generally follows the reasonable use doctrine that grants landowners rights to groundwater beneath their property, with fewer restrictions on pumping. The grandparent-era practice of drilling or hand-digging a well and hand-pumping water from it was the standard domestic water supply method for most of American history, and remains both practical and legal in the vast majority of jurisdictions. Hand-powered pitcher pumps, which can lift water from depths of up to approximately 25 feet, suction lift limit, and hand-powered deep well pumps, which work with a drop pipe and cylinder to lift water from greater depths, are commercially available, require no electricity, and have essentially no moving parts to fail. A hand pump, installed as a backup to an electric submersible pump on an existing well, is a practical, documented emergency water preparedness solution. The Simple Pump, Bison Pump, and FlowJack are commercially available hand pump systems designed to work alongside existing submersible pumps without removing them, providing hand-powered backup water access during power outages at a cost of approximately $400 to $1,000 depending on depth. 15 practices: rainwater collection that was illegal in Colorado until 2016, trotline fishing from the 19th century, backyard chickens that most cities banned and then unbanned, seed saving from heirloom varieties, root cellars built into hillsides, wood ash turned into soap and fertilizer, plantain from the lawn pressed onto insect stings, home vinegar from apple cider, hand pumps on residential wells, and the specific knowledge of tracking, snaring, and reading landscape that 2 generations of suburbanization have largely erased. The knowledge still works. The world your grandparents operated in had a much longer memory than the one we live in now. Hit that like button and subscribe. More content like this coming.